All right, Jessica.
Okay, yeah, we're recording.
Good to go?
All set.
All right, let's open the IDA meeting for September 23rd, 2024.
So we have some guests tonight, and I'll let them handle the introductions when they present, but we have presenters from both the 10 Chapin Street development and the Finger Lakes Railway. Also, McFarland Johnson's represented tonight. They will also have a presentation. And of course, Tom from our FPO and Chris Schubert from the Canandaigua Air Center. And online, I think we have John Goodwin from the City of Canandaigua, and we have MRV Group also.
Connor Hartman.
Yep, and Connor Hartman from MRV, and Eric is also from the Finger Lakes Rail. Tell you now.
Thank you. Okay, so first up on the agenda is the project in the old Labelon building, now known as 10 Chapin.
Hi, everyone. Start with an analogy. I'll kick this meeting off.
I told you.
Try not to fumble my presentation. Good. So after a number of years of attempting to, acquire this building and, be able to start a project, we have finally put the building under contract. The contract lasts about 12 months. During this time, we're going to be satisfying a number of contingencies. The reason it's probably sat this long, a couple different developers that were involved that maybe had too much on their plate or weren't able to, get this project to fruition, but there's also a lot of complexity involved in the project. Title issues, brownfield cleanup, the building was placed on the National Historic Register, which is a good thing from an economic standpoint, but it does require a lot of additional considerations from a construction and development standpoint. There's some liens on the property, so a whole bunch of title issues, brownfield issues. We're at to a point where we think that we can potentially get to the closing table within 9 months. We, as 43 North Real Estate, are a development company. We self-manage our real estate projects, and then we partner with investors in order to, have the necessary capital and personal guarantees required that make the banks happy and let it know that it's a viable project. We are working with an investor that our banks have already pre-approved. We will end up doing a historic tax credit syndication there, so we'll work with a third party, either a large bank, a multinational bank that will syndicate the credits, essentially provide capital for our, higher than normal costs because of the historic restoration component of that. And that allows us to pass on the credits to another third party at some percentage on the dollar that's still being negotiated. We have this project out in front of banks. We have communicated with Canandaigua City quite extensively about it and working with title attorneys to resolve some of the reversionary interest clause on the property. And our plan is to ultimately, and what we have done on the majority of our projects, is multifamily development. We're not, we've never done a LIHTC project. We've done just historic tax credits up to the state. It's all been adaptive reuse. We have built some new construction things, but much smaller in comparison. We operate about 100 residential apartments, all in adaptive reuse structures. And our plan is to put 50 market rate apartments within this building and just a small component of commercial space. So we're currently working with BME right now. This tells a little bit about the background of our team here. I'm kind of off slide completely. But, a couple of different accountants on this. We also have a construction partner. Base Build is our construction company. We will be self-performing that construction. I find that it allows us to manage costs a little bit better when you are the builder and developer on this, rather than going out to a third party. And we also self-perform various elements of the construction project, like finish carpentry, windows, doors, things like that. So we're kind of the last hand to touch project, and that kind of allows us to stay on during the warranty period with the superintendent on site. Just, get to know everybody in town as well. Our guys are out on site, and, I'm there on a regular basis too as part of the project. And we're generally only one project at a time type of company, so I'm not worried that we have 7 other projects going on. I've been really pursuing this project for a couple of years now to even get to the point that we're at. And we've wrapped up our last project probably 12 months ago and stabilized that. About a $12 million project in downtown Rochester that was about 60,000 square feet. Here with me tonight, I have Eric Bonsignore. He is a finance manager on the development and construction side, so he's here to keep our costs in the right buckets. Given that we operate a couple different entities between construction, development, and management, absolutely critical. And Lily Lovelace here is our development project manager. She also helps on our marketing and leasing side as well. So she was the one that just helped us get our building downtown Rochester leased up. So again, I said our goal is kind of, and Eric, who is not here, is my construction business partner in Batesville. So separate entity for the risk mitigation of the construction and development. And we will form an entity to acquire the property we already have, 10 Chapin Street LLC. And to do that acquisition, we'll be partnering with a third-party syndicator, either Chase Bank to pass on the credits, or Foss, potentially Canandaigua National, or Five Star, or Community Bank, or Tompkins as our construction lender and bridge financing lender as part of the project. So I kind of touched on the project description. Some of the things that might be a little bit different in the last version. I know there was a workforce housing type project as part of this. And I know that developer had a very hard time getting his numbers to work with the rise in interest rates and construction prices and whatnot. He's been, left the project. He also had 20 projects going on at once, and developer before that was probably planning market rate from what I understand, but also had a lot of projects going on and unable to get to this project. So being that we're a one project company, we have to go, we're going forward with a market rate since we don't have experience in a LIHTC or another type of deal. But we will be utilizing historic tax credits and brownfield credits in order to make our numbers work and right size the project. Just some of the higher costs, we probably have about $1.5 million ultimately into environmental remediation and asbestos on the project. So that's something that is, you look at 80,000 square foot. If I was going to do this project when I started my career, something like that might have been a $10 or $12 million project, and you may have even seen those dollar amounts presented to you. I think when I saw Sam's project, and I've known that his was kind of in the $20 million range, and now we're up to the $22 million range, and it's just, quote that I like to say about that is I did a sprinkler system on a smaller building 3 years in a row, and each year, 1 year it went from 35 to 45 to 55 every year, exact same project, no changes in it. $10,000 increase every year, which is similar to what you're seeing with construction. I'm hoping that things are stabilized, in terms of cost, and that I feel we got enough contingencies built into this project and enough know-how with our in-house general contractor that we've stabilized pricing, but a lot can happen in 9 months, as you guys know. So timeline, we should actually be able to be back in front of the planning board to gain our municipal approvals in November. And then from there, we already had, some form of site plan approval, so we're going to be amending the existing site plan approval. And then from there, it's probably 3 to 4 months of architectural design to update our building permit and submit that. A couple, months for that. And during the building permit update, when we get about 75% of the way, we will update our SHPO, which State Historic Preservation Office Part 2. That's been submitted. They have a conditional approval subject to final. But I understand that we're allowed to utilize that approval and amend it, so it shouldn't be as lengthy of a process. And we're looking at already solidifying the HTC syndicator and a bank, hopefully in the next couple of weeks here, to be able to do the project. Now, in order to get it to an actual closing table, building permits, insurances, construction contracts, all the engineering design, and all the historic and brownfield. We're also moving forward with getting our certificate of completion for the brownfield work. A lot of the physical work has been done on site, and you probably saw that going on in the last couple of years. There's a little bit more work to do on that internally with kind of like a radon system for commercial buildings, subslab depressurization system. That's another thing that we have to finalize, although they started it, and then we have to continue with groundwater testing to ensure that we've met our limits, or, being at a legal limit in order to get our CSC. So far, those tests are looking good. So it's really up to the DEC to be able to review our final engineering report, the site management plan, and then, looking at getting that done within 6 months and prior to the 9-month close target. Hopefully, we're closing, acquiring the entity that has performed all the work and all the DEC approvals, transfer costs, and then starting the project with the new entity that we were describing. We think project right now, I'm anticipating construction at, at about 16 months a year, but we're somewhere in 12 to 14 months realistically, but I always like to give myself more time because you just never know what. Good thing about this building, at least from my, risk perspective, is there is some structural engineering plans. They were done 5 years ago, and the building is, degraded a little bit since that time, but we do have a really good understanding of, from an architectural and engineering for the work that was inherited. But we are improving on that and trying to take a little bit different approach. One of the cool things that we'll be doing slightly differently is there's less commercial space, and the only reason that I'm not comfortable with doing the commercial space is because in order to underwrite the deal for our banks, we're willing to underwrite for apartments, but unless I have a lease in place with a commercial vendor, you may not be able to approve the full construction amount. That's why you're seeing a little bit more residential. Also, just spending time in Canandaigua here, I feel that Main Street is good, and there's a variety of businesses there, and I'd rather see more residents and more people interacting with Main Street and live here year round, and take on potential Main Street existing retail space. We will have a very small retail space or a potential for commercial space that we don't have a tenant for, but it's so small in comparison to the whole project that it won't impact our underwriting. So from our project goals, we are requesting to do, a similar pilot that was approved for the workforce housing project. Even though we are doing market rate housing, I look at, our body of, 94 to 100 existing apartments right now, which are all adaptive reuse. And I would really liken them to middle-class housing. There are places that, my parents grew up in Irondequoit, they would live. I can put an aunt or uncle there that is still working, a dual income empty nester. We also see, younger people that are just out of college, need a place to live for a few years. So it's generally this kind of, I don't know if it's misconception or this kind of perception, I guess, that you're building these apartments, and yes, they cost more. They're very similar or less than the cost of housing. Housing costs have gone up so much. The median home price in Monroe County, obviously, Ontario, we're up to almost $250,000. But for somebody to buy that, they're looking at between $2,500 and $3,000 from a mortgage payment on top of maintenance and some of the other costs associated with it. So the way that I like to describe our housing is it's less expensive than buying a house or a similarly priced house. And then the good thing about it is when somebody does move into here from Canandaigua, it opens the house up for a family. So that helps not only find housing that's comparable to what a new house costs, it adds to our existing housing stock by getting 50 different people to move in. Now, will one single project, change the housing stock and increase the supply astronomically? No, but I do think that every little bit helps, and that's why we're, in addition to some of the additional costs that I was describing on the brownfield, the condition of the building, curing the blight, and remediating the property. That's why we're asking for this 25-year pilot, similar to what was approved. I think also having the full year residents. We did a project in Fairport, this is an old manufacturing site, and Fairport has really taken off. I don't want to say it was related to our project; they were just very proactive from an economic development perspective. But they did. Village is a good example of what year-round living looks like and what the composition of our tenants would be in the building at a market rate project. So a lot of people spending money in the village, or in the city here, and at the local businesses too year-round. So from a job creation perspective, it's a small amount of jobs associated with running a building. A lot of it's done remotely. We will have 2 part-time people, and I'm showing 2 to 5 part-time positions on the building side. So it's not a big job game. It's more about curing the blight, more about remediating the environmental conditions, more about bringing a population of 100 people if we average 2 per unit here, maybe 125. So, to the area 12 months out of the year as their primary residence. I just postulated that there could be 2 to 3 people in a small 975 square foot business. I don't have a lease or a business identified to that. I am speaking with just people that we're, familiar with in kind of coffee or restaurant or, smaller retail space, that event space type thing. So I don't want to go forward and say that I know that there will be 2 to 3 jobs, say 25 to 55, but we did a little bit of research on what a retail salary would be like in that environment as an owner-operator in a small business. Didn't want to exaggerate the amount of job growth. This is really about redeveloping the site and And the total project cost, you know, we're up to close to $21 million of cost on this project for 80,000 square feet. So I look at that, and we do, from time to time, build new homes as a general contractor, so that is part of our business. And those prices are getting up to $300 a square foot to build a house these days. If you want one on Canandaigua Lake, not including the land, it's $500 a square foot lake price. So here we're getting into that $250 a square foot range, so slightly cheaper all in than building a new house from the ground up. But then also able to, and that's pretty much why I do the adaptive reuse projects. I don't see a way to do market rate at the size of development. These were kind of a large project, but I would still consider it infill development, without tax credits and grant, you know, pilots, low interest financing if there is an opportunity for that. So you can see our capital stack. It's probably not as expansive as the LIHTC deal, but, you know, there's still a lot of sources and equity that need to go into this project to make it work, and get to the closing table and finish the project. So, myself and our investor are taking on, you know, a significant amount of capital to get the banks and syndicators comfortable with loaning us the rest of the $16 million we need to bridge tax credits, bridge grants. Just a sample floor plan. This does have our ground level. It shows just a small amount. One of the things that's kind of cool, we are doing some rooftop decking. So we will have sort of a community space up on the rooftop. And then also, what I would consider the least attractive feature is just, you know, the connection from Main Street into the loading dock area, the concrete's all busted up. And that was previously going to be a turnaround or some type of driveway or parking area. And that I would like to return to green space. So part of our project, you'll see in our municipal submission in October here would be, or in October for November, will be the addition of green space that will help beautify Main Street as well. It's going to cost a little bit more money than laying down asphalt, but I think on a market rate project. And this is very loose artist rendition of it. But the idea is to be able to, you know, you're going to have that visible from City Hall, walking by on Main Street, and then it creates sort of like a little pass-through for our tenants to directly access from the lobby area of Main Street and the businesses on Main Street. These are just some historic pictures to show and just kind of express and articulate some of the complexities with the historic renovation project. One of the biggest expenses on our project is the recreation of these historic windows, and that's probably in excess of $1 million for the 200 windows on the building, but we will be creating the historic look at window, and you're going to get a window that should last 100 years. So it'll either be a steel frame window, or it'll be a wood window, something that's compliant with the State Historic Preservation Office and National Parks. Quite a bit of exterior masonry work to get the building in shape, and you know, when it's done, it's just amazing what they can turn around to be. Brownfield cleanup, that's just another thing that's adding some of the costs, and the reason that we're requesting an extended pilot on this project. There was trichloroethylene tanks, which was a degreasing agent for our manufacturing facilities. There was underground petroleum tanks that were in the facility. There was also detection of heavy metals, which, and that's not a music term, the way the environmental engineers talk about it, but quite a bit of environmental cleanup, and that environmental cleanup extends for the rest of the life of the project, you know, or at least the next 5 years in accordance with our site management plan, assuming we get the groundwater testing down to a level that doesn't require continued DEC involvement on the site. But they will be around to monitor that site for a number of years, and based on our engineers, it doesn't look like they're going to be stop monitoring after 5 years. So, you know, there's definitely some risk associated with that and additional cost. So at this time, that's our project at Chapin Street. So a lot more details that sit behind it, and a lot more spreadsheets, and I'm an open book if anyone has any questions on this project or considerations.
Are the historic tax credits similar to the new market tax credits, where after a certain period of time that debt is forgiven?
They are, so the credits, I haven't done a new market program, but I looked at that, and that looks like you're borrowing something associated with, I've never done one.
Yep.
But the historic credits are essentially, you're partnering with someone that the credits pass through.
Yep.
And for 5 years' time, you pay them a fee, because the federal tax credit is payable over 5 years.
Yep.
they use a master lease structure, so technically this tenant that obtains tax credits has to take an economic interest in the landlord entity, 10 Chapin Street LLC. And because of their economic interest in rent payments to me as a landlord, which is all just paper transactions, that allows them to, the IRS to allow them to pass the credits through and use them. And then they pay us somewhere between, 80, 81 cents on the dollar for federal credits and 74 to 76 cents for the state credits. But they are here for 5 years until the federal credit finally passes through. And during that 5-year time, we have to pay them $75,000 to $100,000 and some number of interest.
It's interest only normally for.
Yeah.
Yep, okay, thank you.
And then after the 5-year period, they exit, and then it becomes just like a normal building operation. We have to actually pay them an exit fee too.
No other questions? So just to be clear, you're looking for, a public hearing at this stage?
Yeah, I think I would like to take the next step and see if, how the public would react to this project, and if there's any questions from the public, I'm happy to do that. Happy to be an open book because we are the general contractor on the project. People want to know level of finishes, what it will look like. We are using hardwoods throughout. Some of those historic standards will dictate the level of quality. We do all of our cabinets through the same location, a custom cabinet maker, out of the old Delco plant in Rochester, New York, off 490. So they're called Nexus 3, all solid surface countertops. Tile backsplashes, nice finishes, things like that. Things that you can't have in new construction all the time. And then exposing some of those existing beams that are in there to kind of give it cool, maybe a little exposed brick in areas that SHPO allows us. So I think we really end up with like a product that's super unique, high quality, very refined, but still keeping it at a competitive price point for a better product than new construction. Maybe more drywall and vinyl.
So, do we have a motion for a public hearing? Second? All right, so we have a motion from Brian and a second from Dave. Do we have any further questions for Joel? All in favor of holding a public hearing?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, public hearing will be held. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
That also means goodbye, I learned too.
Hello, goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, there it is. I lost it. Darn. Exciting project. Okay.
You can come
next
up here if you want, Veronica, it's fine too.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
You can come up to the front if you'd rather, Veronica.
That's the
You want me up
power
there? Oh, you want me up there? Okay, sure.
And I just want to, does Eric want to speak? 'Cause I think he's muted right now.
I don't know if he does or not. He's on, he may.
Yeah, there he took it.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, excellent. So my name is Eric Bedke. I am the new president of Finger Lakes Railway. I took that role in the beginning of August. I had the opportunity to actually ride along with a number of you during the IDA train ride that we had earlier. I guess it was the end of August. So I appreciated that opportunity, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here in front of you. I'll pass the baton over to Veronica and Joanne, but I'm here to support any questions that may come through for me.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us today. So, in our presentation, you'll see we're kind of giving you a pilot review to kind of show you our 29 years of growth, that we've had. Finger Lakes Railway is a short line railroad, located in 6 counties in upstate New York. We also have an off-site switching project that we do in Oswego County. So over the 29 years, we've gone from 7 employees to 45. You'll see sometimes 6 or you'll see 7. Sometimes we include Mike Smith, sometimes we don't. So, but today we have him in there, so it's 7 to 45. We went from 3 locomotives to 17, 0 freight cars to over 600, And the car loads, when we took it over from Conrail, went from a little over 5,600 to, it averages between 16 and 18 annually. And with that, that kind of shows, you know, our customers' willingness to expand and make their reaches further with freight rail to those global sources and markets that we provide as a short line railroad to the rural community and rural customers. Our rail customers actually provided us with their employment numbers, and we found out that there was over 4,000 in state that customers that ship with Finger Lakes Railway employ. We spend 26% of our freight revenue on track maintenance annually. The 5-year spend has been $16.8 million for track maintenance, $13.3 million for capital improvement, and in Ontario County, we were able to determine the reinvestment by Finger Lakes Railway for those capitalized improvements have been $9.9 million. And the pilot has afforded us that ability to be able to make those reinvestments back into railroad infrastructure, including a recent project that we completed, which was the Canandaigua line between Geneva and Canandaigua. It was $3.2 million, and it was for time in surfacing project. And that is in furtherance of trying to get those weight limits up to 286,000 pounds, which is for the newer freight cars today, the more modern freight cars, which would make our customers, give them that competitive transportation. So these are the customers, of course, that are in Ontario County, you know most of them. So Canandaigua Winery, we do alcohol and some corn liquor, I believe is the other. And then DeLong Company, grain exporter, Guardian Industries, Flat Glass. I'm sure you're all very familiar. Pactiv Evergreen, they do the trays, the containers. Seneca Foods, major cannery. Plus, this is their East Coast, major East Coast distribution as well. It's here locally. Self Supply, fertilizer. We have a lot of fertilizer customers. They support a lot of the agriculture here in all the regions. Any questions on? Okay, let me look at this. Let's just let you know, we have 130 miles of track with 39 active online customers. We also have 30 tax parcels just in Ontario County alone. So we have 93 total tax parcels, and 30 of them are here. 85 bridges across the system network, 117 public at-grade crossings, 132 private crossings. So this can kind of help you to understand why we have so much in capital improvements and infrastructure and track maintenance. We also, under the existing pilot, we did a separate agreement, which was a facilities agreement. And through the IDA, that provided municipalities with offsets for annual licenses and rental agreements. So if you notice, everywhere, someone is usually crossing the railroad on, over, or under, whether it's overhead wires, underground sewers, water pipes. That's all Finger Lakes Railway property in those 6 regions. And over $300,000 in offsets have been provided to the 6 counties, with Ontario County receiving $43,324 for year 2023. And of course, we had originally thought that we could probably only get a 10-year extension. When we had first talked with some of the IDAs, they weren't too sure. Seneca had advised us that we could have 15. So the ask is for 15, but, you know, if we could get more, we would like more, of course. We have a lot more to do. It's ongoing. And, you know, I believe our partnership has done well. And we need those types of agreements because, you know, when we are doing bridges, signals, those things generally, bridges, especially bridges, you know, you have a lifespan of 100 years, you know, so it could be from 20 to 100 years in our, investment and in the assets.
So if I,
Yeah,
back here,
we'd like
just
to have the new pilot.
if I could interject here just for a second, Veronica. I think the presentation highlights a lot of the key pieces of infrastructure that we maintain throughout our system. It's an incredibly capital-intensive business that we're in, and for us, it's highly competitive. We are the only short line in the county. However, we have our challenges with truck transportation, so we're always competing directly with truck pricing. And then we have our challenges with the class ones that we interchange. We do not always get to dictate the prices we get for the movement of carloads. So we get squeezed quite a bit from the class ones on how we get to move our carloads and what we get in remuneration for those. So that means that we have this limited pool of resources to take care of all the track and the bridges and the crossings on a regular basis. And the pilot is really critical for us to be economically, positioned to be able to take on all those things as they come up. So that is one of the reasons that we're here to ask for the continuation of this and as long a term as possible. Now, in terms of what the future looks like, there's a smattering of little things that exist out there, but there is discussion around the Corning secondary and what becomes of that. And today we actually had our people do a drone flight of that to get sort of an understanding of what that track looks like from the standpoint of bringing it back to life. So that is a key piece of infrastructure for the future. And of course, that will be heavily capital intensive for us to sort of bring that back to an operational state. Does that make sense to everybody?
Corning secondary that he's talking about is the 11 miles of track coming from town or city of Geneva. It's Packwood Drive to City of Lawrence. So it's the north-south line there. Right now, we have about 3 miles worth of track that services Guardian and allows you to hold some cars, and that's about it, right?
Correct, they call that the Dubin siding, and then there's a rich siding that was correct.
That track has been out of service for
2009, I believe. Yeah, been quite a while.
And just so the board understands what all goes into this particular pilot agreement, because this one's a little different than all the other ones. We will, if we go to a public hearing, it's actually a half dozen public hearings. So we'll be doing public hearings throughout the county. City of Geneva, City of Canandaigua, Village of Clifton, Village of Falls, Village of Shortsville, actually, every taxing jurisdiction. And we were the last presentation, correct?
Yes, we have, I believe there's 10 municipalities and 4 school districts together, so. Yeah.
There's 5 other counties that are working on this as well. And we were, I think, the last of them. So we now can all get back together with our neighbors to talk to them about where they are. They're going to be doing the exact same thing we are, holding public hearings across their county. And the hope would be that we all are in concert. Timeline especially, but also with the agreement. That's where we are right now with this presentation and their ask, and then we'll go to public hearing and negotiate both sides. That's, why not?
Thanks, Veronica.
Thank you.
So I need a motion for hold.
Can I just ask a question?
Of course.
Sure. So you stopped using it it was stopped being used in 2009.
Norfolk Southern,
Okay.
right.
And they just left? it was,
Well, they wanted to abandon it, so some years ago, I don't know if any of you, Sue may recall some of this, but we did try to save it from abandonment at that time, and Finger Lakes Railway had tried to take over that line. We had many key stakeholders that were involved in it federally and statewide. For some reason, it stalled and stopped, and we weren't able to go any further. So it sounds like they have started those talks back up again with Finger Lakes Railway, so, hopefully, you know, that's something that we can come to agreement with. It, you know, it makes more sense. So the reason for it initially is everything that has to go west now has to kind of go all the way over to Solvay, New York, in order to go back west. So it's more of a time, issue for, you know, the freight movement, and, it's a cost thing as well, you know, the further you have to go. So that was the whole point too, is because at the end of that line, is where, you connect also with CSX. So it was to also, you know, make it so that the items that had to go west could go just there to line, instead of having to make the 50-mile truck over to Solvay. And then it had to go from Solvay to, I think, like Selkirk in order to go back, so.
okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to hold a series of public hearings.
I'll make it.
Deb? Second, Brian? Any other further questions or discussion? All in favor of holding the public hearing?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll hold the public hearing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hearing, yeah. How did I make that? That was a fumble right there.
Oh, my God.
Thank
I'm nervous about things.
Thank you, Veronica.
Thank you.
Okay, Ryan, you tell.
So this is, a little bit overdue. This would be the final step in, approving the updated tax exempt policy. This was on the docket for last month, but we did have a meeting. We did have our public hearing on the updated UTEP, and, Michael, Sue, and Ed and I sat here all by ourselves. No one came, so it must be everyone agrees with the updates. This would also hook in the, evaluative criteria. We had this posted for quite a while. A couple comments from the Board of Supervisors, but nothing earth-shattering. I think it was just more of some questions and, you know, hey, why does it say this but not this? But it's nothing of note. So I think all we have to do now is, adopt the new tax exempt policy.
Motion? So moved. Seconded by Dave. All in favor of the resolution to adopt the revised UTEP? Aye. Opposed? There being none, UTEP revisions are approved.
Before we go on, I just want to thank the governance committee for their work on this, and Ed and Barry and Sue and Michael for all their work on it. This started back in February, right? I think is when we had our first meeting. So we met the timeline. We were hoping for September, and
Three of us, so I don't think we would veto our own thing that we say.
Well said, Deb. Ryan's a little slow at me on that.
just trying to think, yeah, I won't do that again. Thanks, Mark and Deb, for your hard work.
You're still up.
The labor monitoring rate, this is.
Did we do the project
Project.
evaluation criteria?
You need a resolution for the project.
Yes, we do.
We need a separate resolution for it to
I'll move
adopt
it.
the project evaluative criteria.
First
Mark
and second.
made it, Deb seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? There being none, we approve that resolution as well.
labor monitoring rates. I think we sent the new rate card from Lockheed Grill. This
This is a page from our application that tells the applicant about our local labor policy, and we had to change the prices because Lockheed Grill costs went up, and they passed that on to us. And then there's also, we added in here prevailing wage, which might apply to a project just like 10 Chapin Street that applied today, that's receiving other public funds in their project if they, what's the percentage, 30%?
30%.
Funding is from public sources, then they must pay a prevailing wage to the labor on the project. And this is the fee to monitor prevailing wage.
But we need a motion to approve the new,
Schedule B for the application.
Schedule B.
Mhm.
Okay, Mark?
Yep.
Second? Deb, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? There being none, we've approved Schedule B rate.
Keep going.
Yep.
All right. Next up is Zach Staff from McFarland Johnson. A couple months ago, both the airport committee and this board have asked us to put together a little presentation as to different ways to manage the airport. Some ideas that Zach and McFarland have come up with to present to all of you. None of this is stuff that we absolutely have to do, but it's ways to control costs or change the way we operate. So with that, Zach?
And I would in no way say that this is all encompassing either, right? We tried to come up with what we could in an environment that we kind of get some things thinking. There's a lot of options out there. Some of what I'll talk about today are probably not feasible. Some might be feasible with some work. And what you may ultimately consider down the road is some hybrid of everything. So if you can just, thank you. So just kind of a little background, right? So Canandaigua Airport, the IDA has had ownership of the airport for 25 or so years. Over that time, since the IDA purchased the airport, it was a private owned airport before, it was a little turf strip. When the IDA purchased the airport, they started accepting grants from the Federal Aviation Administration. And you're going to hear me talk a lot about that because that kind of drives a lot of how the IDA can operate the airport, because it's taking those grants, which are very long. Every time you take the grants, you have a long stipulation of requirements that you have to adhere to by taking those grants. So the grants you accepted this year had 39 grant assurances attached to them. That has increased over the years. I was just looking back when you did the runway extension in 2012. There was there was 39, but they were over 19 pages. Now there's 39. There's 39 now over 19 pages. There's 39 over 17 pages back in 2012, and there was 39 over 12 pages back in 1999. So the assurances maybe haven't changed much in name, but they have added more and more requirements to all of them over time. So this is just a small sampling of the assurances, right? Good titles, right? You have to guarantee you have good titles at the airport. They go on and on, right? Accounting, audit, record-keeping requirements, right? Michael has to do an annual single audit if you spend over a certain amount of federal money every year. You are required to do that by your grant assurance. When you start getting down towards the end here, those are the ones that really kind of come into play when you think about how you're operating your airport. So economic non-discrimination, right? If you're charging one landowner or one tenant a certain amount of rent, you have to charge others a similar amount of rent. Obviously, inflation can change things over time, but there has to be, you can't charge one person $1 and the next person $3 for a tract of land that has similar utilities for the, to build the same square foot hangar. So that is the grant assurance that you've accepted. You can't give anybody exclusive rights to do anything at the airport. The only person that can exclusively say they're going to do something at the airport is yourself. So you cannot bring in an FBO and say, you are the only FBO that's allowed to be here. That's not possible. You can't bring somebody in and say, you are the only person that will ever be allowed to sell fuel at this airport forever. You can't do that. You have to allow people to come in and provide services at the airport. Like I said, the only people that have the ability to provide services exclusively is the airport. So if you were to say, we are the only people that will provide fuel, you can be the only people that sell fuel to the public. If you want to be the only person that operates an FBO, you can be the only entity to operate an FBO if you do it with your own staff. And then there's various requirements for airport revenues. So any money the IDA makes at the airport or an airport sponsor makes at the airport has to be reinvested at the airport. So if you were to make a profit, you have to reinvest that profit in the airport. You cannot put that into a railway or something like that. It has to be reused at the airport over time. Those grant assurances have some timelines to them, right? So there's three categories of projects, right? There's planning projects, so an airport master plan, environmental review, essentially a product where you're getting paper in the end. At the end of that, you have no grant assurance. Your grant assurance associated with that grant is expired as soon as you have completed your study. If you do a development project or buy equipment, your grant assurance will extend 20 years from the date you accept that grant. If you buy land, your grant assurance extends in perpetuity. So that's where the IDA comes back, is that you have the entire airport, as well as several navigation easements off the airport, have them purchased with funding through these grants. So those grant assurances will apply in perpetuity to those properties that were purchased. So if we're talking a little bit about that, right? So that's kind of the negative stuff. So talking a little bit, thinking about people who can operate an airport, we refer to them as sponsors, right? Public agencies, and public agencies like the IDA, like an airport authority in Syracuse, like a county, like a village. You have many options to run an airport. You can, and we see it all over the place, you can fully manage, maintain, and develop the airport yourself using your own staff and your own forces. That's not uncommon. You run the FBO, you lease all the hangars, you provide an airport manager. That's how Jefferson County runs their airport in Watertown. It's fully, they have nobody else providing those development services. They oversee everything. You can delegate portions or complete management to the airport, or you can delegate portions or complete management and maintenance to a third party. So that would be, you have brought somebody else in, they are managing the airport, they're doing all the snow removal, they are greeting people at the door. The airport owner has nobody out there staffing the airport. They have delegated that responsibility out. And then in addition, you can lease all portions of the airport to a third party for development, right? So you've entered into an agreement for a master lease, and that master lessee has the opportunity to then go out and sublease the other portions of the airport for hangar development, and the municipality that owns the airport will have no responsibility for that action. There's also private sponsors, and these are much rarer, but there are private sponsors of public use airports. Where it's rare that they have the grant assurances or that they ever took federal money. But in those instances, it's a fully private operation and management of an airport. Those airports today have very limited opportunities for federal funding, which is very limited. Maybe 15 years ago, there was a lot more private-owned public-use airports in the country that were receiving federal funds to operate, and the feds have cut back on that through some rule changes, like I said, about 10 to 15 years ago. So there's very, very few of them, and the requirements to be a privately owned public-use airport are very high. One of them I know offhand is you have to have at least 100 base aircraft. So, that's a very special, unique kind of airport. So I'm going to go through private entity sponsorship though a little bit, because that is a step and that is something that could be considered. The feds, and I have a quote in the next slide, but the feds, they do not prohibit the sale or lease of an airport with grant assurances. So you do have the opportunity to do that, okay? And there's two ways that this can be done. The airport privatization pilot program is one, and that is the lease or sale of the airport, and you'll transfer your federal obligations to the private sponsor. So that private sponsor is now indicating that they will guarantee that they will meet all of those grant assurances that we talked about before. With that said, there is one caveat in that the FAA may require some former public sponsors to maintain concurrent obligations. So even if you were to sell the airport, you may still be on the hook long-term for some obligations. The examples the feds give are zoning, you have land use controls. In this instance, the IDA would not have zoning controls, but in some instances, when they talk about it, sponsors would, municipality, they would guarantee that they, long-term, that they would protect that area around the airport. There's possibilities here too. What I would think would be the one is that, if the private sponsor were to be unable to continue operating the airport, there may be some requirement and reversion clause I could see being included. This is highly rare. I've actually never seen the pilot program used, but it does exist. One of the perks of the pilot program for a sponsor is that they don't make you pay the grants back. So all these grant assurances, one of the requirements, if you were to sell or close the airport, is you have to reimburse the feds for the value of those grants, or at least a portion of the value of those grants. In this instance, as long as the company that's buying the, or person that's buying the airport agrees to continue operating the airport and those items that were funded with the grants, the feds will not require any repayment of those costs. It does require high-level coordination with the FAA Compliance Division in Washington and requires approval by the administrator of the FAA. So that is a fairly high bar. The other, outside of the privatization program, there are other options. It's a longer process, but it goes away from the privatization program. And again, it's similar, but it's not the same. FAA clearly notes that the sale or lease is not prohibited by law, which I noted. So when you go into the privatization program, the sponsor becomes recognized by the FAA. So if you go to every document right now that the feds have for the Canandaigua Airport, it lists right under it, owner-operator is the Ontario County Industrial Development Agency. In this instance, it would become whoever buys the airport, and they would become recognized by the FAA as the sponsor of the airport. So again, the private entity will agree to assume all existing obligations. So every obligation in the pilot program, it's some obligations. In this program, it's all obligations. And if they ever get a grant in the future, which I said is very rare, but if they ever get a grant in the future, they will have to, they will be obligated under a separate set of grant assurances for private sponsors. Sale proceeds must be used as airport revenue. So if you sell the airport, they just are saying you sell the airport for $500,000, you still have to reinvest that $500,000 into the airport some way. Or you can donate it back to the FAA. I believe that is also an option. So if not revenue, again, you cannot use it for a rail spur, you cannot use it for anything else. It has to go for airport revenue. One of the other items, though, of keynote is unamortized value of grant-funded projects do not need to be reimbursed to the FAA. So that is an important aspect. I'm sure Michael is tracking that to a point. So that does not need to be reimbursed. But like I said, the private entity must agree that they'll continue to operate the airport as an airport. So that runway, for instance, they have to commit that all 5,500 feet of that runway will continue to serve as a runway, at least until those grant assurances expire in 2032, but probably beyond. And as I noted, the private sponsor will not be eligible. So just kind of getting in the nitty-gritty, the FAA funds the airport in a number of different ways, but one of the ways is the airport gets non-primary entitlement, which is $150,000 a year that can be used for development projects. Private sponsors aren't eligible for that. There's one very small pot of money that private sponsors can go and competitively try to get funds for runway rehabilitation, but it's a small pot of money, and it's highly competitive. So it's unlikely that and honestly, most of the private, if somebody were to buy the airport, they wouldn't want to take on any more grant assurances, most likely. So the next step, right, short of selling the airport, is finding a different way to manage or run the day-to-day operations of the airport. So your responsibility overall as the sponsor of the airport is, again, to adhere to the federal obligations of those grant assurances, 39 grant assurances that you accepted. Ultimately, what you could look to do is find an opportunity to continue to serve as the sponsor of the Canandaigua Airport, but ultimately have no day-to-day involvement in the airport. Somebody else will run it, somebody else will handle the leasing, somebody else would generally make the revenue off the leasing, or at least have the ability to negotiate the leases. You would remain the sponsor and have an agreement to ensure that your operator is adhering to the grant assurances. There's an airport in New Jersey, that runs in this method. Morristown Airport, town of Morristown owns the airport, but they have a private company that does all the leasing and does all the management, and essentially all the town does. I mean, I'm sure they do a little bit more, but their general role is accepting grants and processing grant reimbursement. And the tenant actually manages the construction projects as well. So there's very little oversight required. One of the biggest aspects here is you have to make sure, if you go this route and think about finding somebody to manage and lease the airport, you have to watch for conflicts of interest. That is something the Fed's strongly concerned about. So if you provide an aeronautical service, or if they're also the FBO or the lessor, and they're the only people who can lease land to people and operate the airport, you get a lot of extra control over access and competition. So you want to, again, avoid any appearances of impropriety there. What the FAA recommends is that if you do this, you go down the road of having two separate agreements. You can do the same firm, but you have that one agreement is for the management and operation of the airport, and the other is for leasing. That way, if you were to have an issue with the way the airport was being managed, you could cut ties on that lease, but still keep the hangar or the development lease. So it might not be quite as tricky to get out of it, if you will. Not uncommon to what the IDA had in place 15 or so years ago at the airport. So again, thinking about total delegation of airport administration, right? You've got to make sure, you have provisions to protect the airports for the grant assurances they typically will incorporate day-to-day tasks at the airport, the collection of rents, presence at the airport, mowing, snow removal, community interaction. And as I noted, the public agency remains the sponsor. So at the end of the day, in this instance, the Ontario County IDA will still be the sponsor for the airport, and this board would still accept the grants. And Michael would still process the reimbursements, and the IDA board would likely also still be responsible for capital improvements, but that would be, you'd have to negotiate that in. But everything would come through this board, and you would still have a private operator out there running the airport. Leasing the airport would include the right to sublease airport property to the third-party tenants. Again, you'd have to have sufficient language in there to ensure that your tenant isn't giving exclusive rights to somebody, because they can't do that. And you'd have to have the ability to reverse any instances of that. A lot of times that can be covered by requiring the IDA to, co-sign leases or items of that nature, but there's ways you can do that. And you have to include language that acknowledges the operation of the airport under the grant assurances for use and benefit of the public. So making sure, again, triple writing, those grant assurances. That really is what's driving and keeping the IDA out of issues with the FAA and the federal government, or adherence to those grant assurances, and going down that line, preventing complaints, investigations, and whatnot. So there's a lot here, a lot of different options, right? Like I said, there's all sorts of hybrids that can be done too. You could look at leasing out a portion of the airport for a private developer. It doesn't have to be the entirety of the airport. Could be different tasks of managing or operating the airport. Right now you have what's called a maintenance operator out there, and an FBO. They are both private companies. It could be one company that does both, plus manages the airport. You could continue down that road of multiple vendors providing services. Typically, in this instance, trying to make it life easier for yourself. So less vendors, the better. But just, again, trying to get thoughts going. There's a lot of different options. None of them are good. One of the problems that will be, you'll find if you start going down this road is the IDA owns very little space at the airport, and the space, for buildings, that was what I'm getting at, is generally what will attract, when we went through the process to try and attract an FBO a few years ago, not having space for them to lease out for aircraft, readily there available to them was a problem. So that may very well come up again if you're looking to delegate out the operation of the airport, because again, anybody that comes in will have to build a hangar or some other facility, which will cost a fair amount of money in order for them to store aircraft, which is where they'll make their money. Ryan, did I hit the high points?
High points, yes, of course. So I will share this electronically with everybody. And if you want a hard copy, I can print it for you. Also going to be sharing it with the group of supervisors that Dave and I met with a couple months ago. So this, like Zach said, we asked for some clarification on a couple different questions. It's pretty dense, but it addresses those questions.
So based on all that, would you have a recommendation, top 2 recommendations, if we wanted to do something with the airport, knowing all the gobbledygook?
Yeah. I mean, you know, so I've worked with the airport for 15 years, right? So I've seen the ups and the downs. I wouldn't go privatization. I think that's a road that it will be difficult and it will take a long time, and I don't know if I see the market there. You could go back out. It is not a big effort to go out and do an either an RFP or an RFQ for an operator and the lessor, and see if there's interest out there. If that's an option the IDA board is thinking might help save some money, that is a fairly inexpensive method to at least understand the interest that's out there in the community. Now, and it's not uncommon for an airport of this size. Penyan is operated by Seneca Foods. Generally, that's a really good example. Most of, a lot of the other smaller airports, not say smaller, but airports of this size in the state have a management structure that kind of goes that way. A master lessor is a little more rare. We don't tend to see that, but finding somebody else to manage the airport is a little more common.
I guess, just to regroup that is, I think it would be helpful, since you've been involved with the airport for 15 years, is really to say, based on everything I've seen and what we know, and with the IDA to get out of the airport business, this would be my top 3 recommendations, and this is what are the pros and cons of each of those recommendations, and then that way, we could have a discussion about those recommendations or options.
Yeah, I'm with it. Yep, and I'm happy to write something out like that for the board if you want. I mean, what I can tell you right now is the direction Ryan is going with the county, be my first recommendation. That would be the best.
Well, that being the first, sorry, Brian, would strengthen our hand with the county too. So I think that's probably where you're
But
headed.
I think that coming from him or from McFarland is helpful in terms of your conversations with the county. Say, we've done the research, we've been doing this for 15 years, here are the pros and cons. Here's why I think here's my recommendation, I think we should move forward with the county. And here's why.
Well, I agree. I think that would be really strengthen the argument of what direction we should have.
It might be helpful too to have some case study examples as well, because it's not the first time an airport sponsor has changed from municipality to municipality, right? And why that happens and the benefits of that. Counties are much stronger in New York than towns and villages and IDAs.
Sure.
So it's definitely not the first time.
Yeah, the county's got more money anyways.
Well, I mentioned Jefferson County before, but the city of Watertown owned the airport up there for years. And
Clearly wasn't the way the meeting.
I know.
Thank you, Zach.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Zach, if you want to throw that together for me by next 30 days?
Yeah.
That way I can at least share it out.
I thought you were gonna say Friday.
By October 28th.
We want to go into executive session.
Yes.
To discuss the leasing of real estate.
Pardon me?
Just to reference your, to go into executive session to discuss leasing of real estate.
Yes,
And,
that's why we
which
wanna
could
go.
impact the value of that real
Yes.
estate.
So usually a motion.
Yes, what Ed said. I need a motion. Dave?
I'll make the motion.
A second.
Deb, second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None?
Thank you.
Gentlemen, if you'll excuse us. Out.
So to update the board on the status of Acusa, we have made connection with new leadership They're working through the legal process on their appeal, and we will continue to get updates every so often as that works through the court. That is the update.
All right. Minutes from the last meeting of 7/22. Need a motion to, approve those minutes.
Move.
Mark? Second? Second. Dave? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Those minutes are approved. Bob? Airport update?
I don't think I have much to add there. I think we are completed with the punch list of the generator project, so that's gonna close. The roadway rehab for and fencing area for the new driveway is back on. The contractor is back on board and is following through with the compliance issues for their good faith effort for contractor selection of the state. So they seem to be on track. McFarland Johnson is monitoring that well. So it looks like we'll be probably executing that in the spring. Also in the spring, an update with the AWAS, that contract is completed and signed, which includes the roadway to the weather station. However, with given the lead times for some of the equipment, that'll probably be a spring execution as well. So everything happens in the spring.
Any concerns on the roadway project? Because I think the concern was they underbid it and they couldn't do it for the pricing.
Well, I wasn't in on the call when the discussion was had, but I think they realized that it's probably more costly for their business otherwise if they don't follow through with this project.
I would agree with that. I'm just concerned about the quality of product we're gonna get.
I think we'll be okay. He, Ed helped out quite a bit here to have the company see the error in their ways. I think that they want to make sure that we are happy. We finally got to meet with the owner. He seems to be frustrated, would be underselling it with his construction management. I think they're going to want to make it happen. Because they don't want another nasty grant from that, I think.
Yeah, to answer your question, Mark, I think the engineering scope and detail is pretty well defined in there, and there'll be on-site supervision throughout the project. So, yeah, they're not going to do anything extra for us, but they're going to be there to make sure they completed the contract.
The on-site supervision?
McFarland Johnson is part of the contract with them. Probably Brett,
Yeah.
who was here.
Awesome.
Good news at the airport. One other quick thing on the airport. I don't know if anybody saw the news from the other night. The Mercy Flight helicopter with the hard landing. Should thank the Canandaigua Fire Department and Ontario County Emergency Management. They were already on scene, obviously, when I got there, had everything under control. FAA was coming the next day to do their investigation. All three walked away. Everybody's safe. So I just want to make sure to thank them for their effort.
Mike?
So,
Jump in the airport stuff.
Bill,
Sorry.
Bills for payment.
Bob?
yeah, we got utilities and maintenance. Nothing really stands out there. There's a McFarland Johnson invoice, and that was for the apron rehab engineering project, which is part of the AIP grant. And just some maintenance, $28 light bulbs, $343 for the sign.
VAS is.
This is the FBO.
And then for the agency, we've got, as you see, things are doubled up, but we got August, September for the treasurers to Ontario County. We got 3 bills from Hodgkin Rust. We're just getting caught up with the new contract rolling over and getting ratified. We're just getting caught up on the bills there. The NBO card, that's the credit card. I just want to make one comment on the QuickBooks. I paid 100% of the QuickBooks to this. We're going to get reimbursed from the other two companies, actually 3 companies. I'm going to allocate it based on transactions. I've already done those allocations. You'll see some revenue offsetting that expense next month. Lucky Grill for the last 2 months, and finally, Miss Ferry getting her second quarter mileage.
I'll accept the motion to approve those. Dave?
Second.
Deb? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Brian's update. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Wow, that was effective.
Just to give it, so what I updated the Board of Supervisors on, I think you can't expect them just to leave this one out there. This today at the Planning and Environmental Quality Committee, and I will have this next month when we get it, better organized. Year to date, we have, 126 visits for our VR, our retention and expansion visits. What I want to organize is what that means. So if we visited so-and-so company, what did we do for them? Was it workforce development? Was it IDA? Was it OCEDC? So we'll have that next month. The department is going to be very, very busy over the course of the next few months. Talked to the Board of Supervisors about this at length, many meetings in a row. The EDC is starting to see an uptick in loan requests, which is something that we have not had over the past few months. It's close to, and we've got 2 presentations, one this month and one next. This board obviously is incredibly busy with not just the airport, but all of the presentations that we've had coming up before us. And now the EDC is taking on a housing project, applying to the state for about $2 million worth of housing money for, what is it, vacant rental improvement program. This is properties that are not able to be on the market that we're going to try to get back on the market. There may be an ask of this board to help out with that program, more of an oversight function for seeker, because the EDC can't be lead agency on that, or we don't believe they can be. So I'll have more on that next month. Tom Harvey was going to come in this month and explain it and ask. However, I knew there was a kickoff and 3 presentations, and Tom, even though if he says he's going to be short, no way in hell. So I asked him to come next month. I'll say that, happy to answer any questions. Enjoy the kickoff.
Brian?
I'm good.
Ready to adjourn the meeting?
No, I think Deb or Mark should do it.
I'll accept a motion from anyone to adjourn the meeting.
I'd love to do that.
I don't know.
Yeah,
All
I
in
got some
favor?
questions.
Aye.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good job, Andy.
Thank you.
Do you want to stay for this?
I get.
Yeah, I find it entertaining.
Edwin Smith?
Excellent.